The ISIS graphic novel Indiegogo is live. Help me publish the first comic book featuring the goddess next door by putting in a pledge today. I was watching a Richard C. Meyer video last night, and he was talking about how DC's Dan Didio says that a shallow talent pool is the reason why they are making fewer comics. And after watching his video and then reading the Bleeding Cool article, I have to call complete BS on Dan Didio's argument for why DC is making fewer comics. Now, the real reason I believe DC Comics is making fewer comics is because they just can't get the sales. And the reason why they can't get the sales, again, is because you have fewer people chasing all of these books, because DC has over 70 books, Marvel has over 90 books, and any trade publisher is going to tell you that both those numbers is just too many books anyway for any publisher to have, because there's no way a human being can buy all of those books with a regular salary. So any smart publisher is going to have a catalog of maybe 12 to 16 core titles, because that's what a customer can buy with a $50 bill or a $100 bill over a month if they are a completist. So you really want to keep your catalog very small so that the customer can come in and buy all the books if they choose, because that's what I do with the SJS Direct imprint. I usually only publish maybe 4 to 6 books a year, and that's something I do because I understand that my customers, they don't have a lot of money, so I make sure that I give them options to go out here and be able to buy all those books. And that, one of the other things I do is I tier out the releases so that people can have the money to go out here and buy the books. So for example, in March I have Isis All That Glitters coming out, and in April I'm going to have Esteem Goddess Of coming out. So the reader has a window to go out here and buy both of those titles, and then maybe in May or June I'm going to have John Haynes' Dark Succubus coming out. So you can get all 3 of them if you want early in the beginning, or you can go get all 3 later on, but you don't have to go out here and make all your purchases all at once and feel overwhelmed. And one of the things that the comic book industry is doing is they're not staggering out the catalog so that the reader can choose what titles they want to buy and have enough money to go out here and buy other things. With a 90 catalog with 90 titles, you have at least about $2,000 worth of books there at $3.99, $4.99, or even $2.99. It's at least about $1,000. So that's a lot of money when you think about buying comics. So I look at that part and I see where a big problem is that you want to have all of these books, and no person can go out here and buy all of those. But again, your Dan Didio wants to deflect by saying it's a shallow talent pool that is leading to this catalog implosion, but it's just that they have too many titles, just like DC Comics had way too many titles back in 1978 when they had the original DC implosion. And your DC back then in the late 1970s, early 1980s pared down until they got up until the mid to late 80s, and even then their title log was not even that big then, and they kept it fairly small, and it was fairly affordable to the average reader. So I look at his argument talking about a shallow talent pool, but it's not a shallow talent pool. There's plenty of talented writers and artists out there, and unfortunately your Dan Didio isn't looking for those people in the same way your Sana Amanat is not looking for those people, because many of those talented people, like myself, have been out here for years. I mean, I have been online with my blog ever since 2007. I have had writing samples up there since about 2009 or so of sample chapters of my novels. I have numerous critically acclaimed books up on Amazon.com, and I have shown that I can go out here and put together a serialized book with the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, and the John Haynes series. And I've also done outlines on my blog where I outline runs for a Nightwing series, a Mr. Terrific series, a Wonder Woman series, and again, I have had this material up online for years. So when your Dan Dido comes out here making the argument, talking about a shallow talent pool, I know that he's just as full of it as your Sana Amanat is at Marvel when they talk about talking about a shallow talent pool. Because again, I have been up here for 10 years online with, again, a array of writing samples from my novels, my ISIS and E-Steam series books, my John Haynes series books, and my novels like Spinsterella, Spellbound, The Legendary Mad Matilda, and I have put, again, outlines for DC Comics characters, planned runs, and I have had samples of comic scripts up on my blog. So there is a great array of material I have up on my blog, Shawn James, Black Freelance Writer, that your Sana Amanat or your Dan Dido could have easily taken a look at, and they could have easily gone and contacted me. And moreover, I even applied for their so-called DC Writers Workshop and a couple of years ago when I was going to the library, and I submitted samples to DC Comics. So when they sit there and talk about a shallow talent pool, again, I see how full of it your Dan Dido truly is, because here he was when he had the DC Writers Workshop. He goes out here and gets Mags Visaggio to go work for him, the same woman who gave us the absolutely horrific Kim and Kim and the absolutely dreadful Eternity Girl, one of the worst-selling comics in the DC catalog a couple of years ago. So he talks about a shallow talent pool, and he goes out here and makes this excuse when, again, I know that there's plenty of great talent out there because I go out here and I talk to a lot of that talent. I've worked with a lot of that talent, and a lot of those guys, they don't even get an email sent back to them. They don't get contacted, and I don't believe they're getting contacted because they are going to call out your Dan Dido about his mismanagement of DC Comics and his complete mismanagement of the DC Comics brand, because it was his mismanagement that led to DC Comics winding up with this implosion right now. Because it seems like before, when he took over DC in 2002, we had the exact same problems with DC that we're having right now. Because back in 2002, your Dan Dido comes in, we start getting this dark deconstructionist model from Watchmen and The Dark Knight Returns and dark, dreary stories like your Graduation Day where they killed off Donna Troy. And then we get Identity Crisis, a story that is absolutely terrible because not only does it murder the very well-liked Sue Dibney, the wife of the Elongated Man, it then goes on to take the DC characters and compromise their very morals and ideals and makes characters act completely out of character. I do not believe that someone like Barry Allen, a family man, would go out of his way to mind-wipe Batman or to talk about mind-wiping Sue Dibney after she was raped. I don't believe any married man like Barry Allen or your Carter Hall would do that, because knowing that if this horrific thing happened to Sue Dibney, they would think about their own wives. So that was out of character for me when I looked at Identity Crisis as someone who has read DC Comics back in the 70s and the early 80s, and I got to know these characters. I looked at that and I was just mortified. And to say that, Zatanna would do this and help along with this, again, it just did not fit those characters. But your Dan Dido, he's going to insist that this was a great story, and this story literally destroyed the entire structure of DC Comics and led to DC Comics going on a sales decline, because as people watch DC Comics and the characters they love wind up being maligned by your Dan Dido and his deconstructionist agenda, where he literally sucked all the fun and all the joy out of DC Comics by making every character miserable. And those characters who were fun characters like Ted Kord and Ralph Dibny, he tried to find ways to murder them. He drove away most of the customer base for DC Comics. And after he finished driving away the customers, he made excuses and then tried to say, oh, it's just the content, and then tried to reboot everything multiple times before we got this New 52, which drove every customer almost out of the DC brand. And the damage was so devastating that it made it to the point where no one even wanted to buy DC toys, merchandise. Because I remember I was collecting DC Universe Classics at the time, and a lot of people were just disgusted when they heard about the New 52, and they walked completely away. These were people who had been collecting this line ever since about 2002 with the original Mattel Batman line. And by the time this line came along with this New 52, that's when people started putting their collections up on eBay. And that's when people who used to buy DC Direct at the time said they were going to stop buying DC Direct. So his decisions literally destroyed the entire DC Comics brand, but he wants to sit there and make the argument that it's a shallow talent pool that's led to this implosion. And that's, again, a complete lie, because we can see from him being in charge from 2002 to about 2015 or so, when Jeff Johns brought in Rebirth, that things were going bad for DC Comics under his leadership. Jeff Johns comes in, he tries to bring Rebirth, and he tries to start resetting the track to get us back to the old DC universe with Rebirth and the Doomsday Clock, which was meant to reset everything, as I believe. And people were anticipating that return to the old DC universe. But your Dan Dido gets back in charge because Jeff Johns gets promoted or moves on to another division. And we go back to the exact same dysfunctional, dark, deconstructionist model of storytelling once he gets back in charge. And then we get stories like the absolutely horrifically bad Heroes in Crisis, a story that most people have critically panned and is just virtually unreadable. But this is not, this is supposed to be a shallow talent pool that's leading to this problem, but not Dan Dido's incompetent leadership. Because I noticed that when he got in charge, we get the Heroes in Crisis, we get Tom King's Batman 50, which jerks people's chain, and we also get him deciding he's going to end a very popular Superman run from Dan Jurgens and Peter Tomasi, which was bringing people back to Superman because Superman sales were going up. He decides to end that so that Brian Michael Bendis, hack extraordinaire, can come in and take over the Superman titles, and the Superman titles have been in free fall ever since. Moreover, he also decides to bring in your Kelly Sue DeConnick on Aquaman, and he decides to bring in G. Willow Wilson on Wonder Woman. So, several books that were actually doing fairly well. Aquaman was doing very well. Your Wonder Woman was doing decent at the time. And he decides to bring in these crazy far leftist writers, and they start, well, along with Brian Michael Bendis and your beta male Tom King, and they start doing damage to the DC brand one mo again. And in addition to this, doing this damage to the DC brand, your Dan Dido again starts canceling books that sell, like the Jurgens, and not the Jurgens, Peter Tomasi Super Sons, which was selling very strongly. Now, your Dan Dido before this, when he first came to DC, he decided he was going to cancel the 1993 or 94 Robin series, or the 1998 Nightwing series, two books in the Batman family that were selling like hotcakes and had no problem keeping readers engaged. He decides, I'm just going to cancel those books because I want to go in a new direction. And when you're a publisher, You just can't do that because, again, when you're in publishing, 90% of your books are going to fail, and it's the 10% of books that sell that pay for the 90% that fail. So he's gone out here for a second time, going out here, canceling books that sell, getting creators off books that were selling, and then decides to launch books that wind up not selling, something a publishing professional would never do. But your Dan Didio, he wants to talk about, again, a shallow talent pool when it's clear that it's not a shallow talent pool. That's the problem. The problem is that he is an incompetent leader, and it's his bad business decisions that are leading to the lack of fans, and it's his really terrible business decisions that lead to people not wanting to buy comic books. Now, we're in the middle of the biggest superhero boom since the 1990s, yet these comic publishers can't seem to get their heads out of the sand, and they can't seem to get past their old archaic 1990s business model where they want to make readers angry so that they can engage them, not understanding that you are alienating all of these casual readers out here who would have given these books a chance if they come out of the movie theaters or the TV things with the CW shows like Arrow, or even the DC streaming service shows like Titans. They would have given these books a chance, but when they look at these books and they look at these dark, dreary, deconstruction bottles, they say to themselves, you know, this is just too dark for me, because I remember this Saturday I was watching Batman Bad Blood, and the thing was so dark, I just got disgusted watching it. I mean, this is not the DC I grew up with. The DC I grew up with was all ages, it was family friendly, and it was something that you could, yes, there were dark stories like Batman, but Batman wasn't so dark and so mean-spirited that you just couldn't, you know, enjoy it. It's like Batman, he was middle of the road, and he was a pretty decent guy. But when I look at that Bad Blood, it was just an unwatchable film, and everything in there was just so mean-spirited. And when I look at DC Comics these days, they're just so mean-spirited. And when it comes down to comic books, again, they're supposed to be an escape. They're supposed to take us away from our problems. But when I look at the DC Comics your Dan Didio has been producing, all they do is give us problems. But again, he sits there and talks about how there is a shallow talent pool. And I say that he is completely full of it, because I myself, again, have been having my material out here for over a decade. I have numerous 4- and 5-star reviews on my books on Amazon. I have numerous people telling me my work is rock solid when they go out here and read it. And I also, again, have had those writing samples up there as far back as maybe 2007 or 2009 or so. And I know in 2011, I definitely started putting out a lot of samples out there. So when I hear these guys talk about a shallow talent pool, I don't know what they're talking about. It's just that you're not looking for that talent. And when that talent comes to you, like myself, and goes and applies to your writers' workshops, you're not looking for it because you want somebody to tell you what you want to hear instead of trying to produce what the customer wants. And that's why you're being forced to make fewer comics, because the books you're making are all about what you want and not what the customer wants. And what the customer wanted was what they were getting in Rebirth, and what they were anticipating was a return to that classic DC universe, because that's what people wanted from the jump. Because what your Dan Didio continues to insist on doing is ramming this New 52 down your throat, ramming that dark model down your throat, but the customer themselves is saying, I don't want this, just like they're saying they don't want SJW Marvel. What they want, again, is all ages, family-friendly superhero stories about heroes who are helping their community, heroes who want to help the people in their community, heroes who want to protect their community, and they're not getting that from your DC Comics or your Marvel Comics. And it's not a shallow talent pool that's the problem. It's the fact that your Dan Didio doesn't have enough depth to understand the complexities of comic storytelling, nor does he understand how the business of publishing runs. When it comes down to DC Comics, they need somebody who understands the craft of publishing, someone who understands the business of publishing to run it, and they need someone who can literally go out here and assess talent and understand where the talent is, because I see that talent every day. I go out here, I'm on the boards of like DeviantArt, I'm on Facebook, I'm on the Facebook comic boards, and I see that talent out there, and in most cases that talent winds up working indie and making their own projects because they can't get in the door for DC Comics. And even a lot of the veteran talent, they can't get in the door because your Dan Didio wants to push his brand new 52 model, even though that model has been a proven failure in the comic shop, it's been a proven failure in merchandising, and it's even been a proven failure as related to the DC Cinematic Universe, because the entire DC Cinematic Universe followed the new 52 model, and that's why it couldn't get off the ground. When we look at movies like Aquaman and Wonder Woman, which follow the traditional DC model, we see that it can be a success, but your Dan Didio is the big problem. And when he again says that there's a shallow talent pool, it's not a shallow talent pool, it's the fact that he has no talent, and he winds up hiring no talents, and it's those no talents that wind up running DC straight into the ground. If you'd like to support the ISIS graphic novel Indiegogo, you can help me publish the first comic book featuring the Goddess Next Door by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to try some of the SJS Direct publications like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, The Temptation of John Haynes, and the Spinsterella trilogy, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com in the description box. There you will find the paperbacks and ebook versions of my work. And if you want to help me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, E-Steam The Sands of Time. It's action and adventure in ancient Egypt in this terrific teen time travel romance. Get your copy of E-Steam The Sands of Time at your favorite online bookseller today.